Hi, and welcome to Chocks Hangar. If you don't know that song, that was Millennium and Fortress. And the reason that I was playing that song was because today we are looking at Aeroplane Heaven's brand new Control-Ezy range, the first aircraft that's come out in that range, and it is the FMA IA-58 Pucara. And if you know anything about Argentina, you'll know the Quechuan language of the native people in that region. The word Pucara means fortress. See, always thinking. You might also have noticed that on the footage of me playing that tune, behind me on the wall, picture of Che Guevara, Ernesto Guevara, famous Argentinian. So don't just throw this thing together. There's a bit of planning involved in it. Now, the Control-Ezy concept is brand new range of jump in and go airplanes. Doesn't matter what they are, whether it's a 4-engined airliner or a twin-engine fighter or whatever. They're all going to be the same price. They're all $19.95, which roughly translates to €20 or 20 quid. And they are minimal controls. You can start them all with Control-E. The manuals don't take long to read. They've got a few switches in the cockpit which are operational, but they've not gone mental with that. Visually, they're going to look good. PBR textures and all that kind of stuff, and they'll be easy to fly. One of the parts of that concept, though, is that they've kind of updated the concept of the 2D cockpits that you used to have in FS95 and FS98, where they've got a 3D cockpit, but it isn't a full virtual cockpit. Now, some people have expressed a little bit of concern about that and what it's actually going to mean, but we'll see in a moment that there is actually a 3D cockpit. It's just not a full-on 3D cockpit. So let's check that out right now. The cockpit. Now, the Control-Ezy concept is that there is only that part of the cockpit modelled. So if you start moving the views backwards and what have you, or turning too far to the left or to the right, or looking up too much or looking behind you, you're not going to see anything beyond this. Basically what they've done is effectively it's a 3D version of the old 2D cockpits that you used to get in FS98 and stuff like that. Now, some people might not like that. Some people won't mind it, but that is what they're talking about when they're saying there's no virtual cockpit. Doesn't mean that there isn't a 3D cockpit, because quite clearly you can see that there is a 3D cockpit. It's just not all the way around with the seat modelled and the stuff behind you and what have you. So when you get in the cockpit of this thing, your hat switch does not work. I am moving the hat switch on my joystick at the moment, and it is doing nothing. So it kind of reduces what you can do with things like chase plane and stuff like that, because you can't look about as much. Now, if we go back on the external view, there's my hat switch. So you can see there is not a problem with the hat switch. So don't think your joystick's broken or your settings are wrong when you get in the cockpit of this thing and you're moving your hat switch and it's not changing the view. It's meant to be like that. So if we go back in the cockpit, of course the problem with that is that if you've moved that view, then you have to start using the keyboard shortcuts to kind of get yourself back in position, which can be a bit of a faff, as you can see. Of course, there is an easier way to do it, and the easier way to do it is if you do this. Boom! You reset the aeroplane. So here we are in P3D version 5 with the Control-Ezy Pucara in an Argentinian Air Force paint scheme. Here you get 10 paint jobs with this add-on. So lots of different air forces, not just the Argentinian Air Force, so like Sri Lankan stuff and Chilean and all that kind of stuff. Because the Pucara, although it's famous for being involved in the Falklands conflict, it did also get into combat in Sri Lanka as well. So you get quite a few paint jobs with it. Now, there is a specific FSX version and a specific P3D version. The main difference between the two is the P3D version has PBR textures on it, physics-based rendering textures on it, so they're a little bit fancy. I mean, it's a very, very nice model with very, very nice texturing and wear and tear on it and stuff like that. So you're not going to get that PBR stuff going on in the FSX version, but other than that, it looks basically the same. There is a known issue in P3D, which the Control-Ezy Aeroplane Heaven guys have included in a README file that comes with your download when you install it, and that is that if you use the keyboard shortcut on an external view to start the light, what that does is that prevents the panel on the interior in the cockpit working to turn the lights on, and you would have to reset the aeroplane to do that. It'd still work with the keyboard shortcut, but that is a known issue with it, so no real major problems with it. It's just one of those things to be aware of. So you can see that it is a very nice exterior model, and there is the ability to arm it and put various weapons on, and there are different versions of the Pucara included as well, because the Argentinians did a version that could carry torpedoes so that they could attack the Royal Navy fleet during the Falklands conflict. There is a panel on the interior that will allow you to put different weapons on and what have you, so you can see that those hard points are under the wings, and we'll have a go with that in a moment or two and put some weapons on it. Now, the big thing with Control-Ezy is that it is intended to be a simple add-on, not with a lot of keyboard shortcuts. So if you have a look at the manual, and here is the entire manual. This is it, 7 pages, so not a massive amount of shortcuts. Now, the other thing with the Control-Ezy stuff is that it doesn't have a fully modeled 3D virtual cockpit. It has kind of like a 3D concept of the old 2D panels that is like this. If you look at that, which means that if you turn your view too far, you're not going to see the cockpit beyond the kind of 3/4 views, and it is intentional. That obviously that improves performance, but these Control-Ezy planes are intended for people who just want to jump in and fly. Now, I think there's a bit of an ulterior motive going on with Aeroplane Heaven doing this. I think they're gearing up for the Microsoft FS 2020 flight sim with the Xbox market, because I suspect there'll be a lot of people that want jump in and go planes, and I think that's what Aeroplane Heaven are up to with this Control-Ezy stuff. Could be wrong, but that's my suspicion. Anyway, let's have a look at that cockpit. In case you were thinking, oh no, no virtual cockpit, it's going to look terrible, and it doesn't. You can see that it has got an interior cockpit. Now, it does limit you on what you can do with the view. So if you get into the virtual cockpit of this and you start using your hat switch to look around, I can assure you I am using my hat switch at the moment, and it is not changing the view. Now, if you fire up Chase Plane and you hold down the middle mouse button, you can look around, but as we've seen, there isn't a sort of full virtual cockpit to go for anyway. So you're basically on the forward view, but there are 2 forward views. We'll see the other one in a moment or two. But when I'm moving my hat switch and the view isn't changing, it does not mean that my hat switch is broken. Because if we go back on the external view, if that loads in, taking a while, there. I am moving the view with the hat switch. So it's not a problem with your hat switch. So when you jump in the cockpit, don't think that your hat switch is broken or your control assignments have gone wrong or what have you, because that is not the case. It is intended to be like that. Now, what you can do is you can roll the mouse wheel backwards and forwards, and you do kind of have to do that to get to some of the lower switches on there. But this thing is intended to be really simple. It's intended to be keyboard shortcuts, the main one of which is the name of the product, Control-Ezy. So Control-E to start the engines, and if we hit that, Control-E, to start the engines, then what we should get is the thing firing up with a bit of luck. Yeah, just make sure that I've got all the switches on. So, navigation light switch on, and rotating beacon light switch on, and landing light switch, yeah, we'll have it on. What have we got here? Instrument panel light switch on or off. Weapon store selector. This is this thing here, and that to sort of put different stores on, and this thing here, this loadout selector, rotates in order to do that. So if you go weapon stores on the wings and then you rotate this thing round, what you end up with is oh, if I can find it, there we go. So we've got LAU or LAU rockets, if you prefer to call them that. So now we've got those on the wing, and if I go back in the cockpit and rotate that around again, you've got Mark 82 bombs. So we've got some snake eyes on the thing, and then boom, like that. Fuel tank on the center line. I'm sure you know what that is. Fuel tank on the center line with Mark 82s on the wing stores. So you've got that. So a bit of long range and some sort of bomb dropping. And good old napalm, like that. So you've got 6 napalm canisters on the wing pylons, and then you've got what have you got there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the center line. So yeah, pretty tooled up there. And then torpedo. Yeah. Now it will depend on which version of the Pucara that you load up as to whether you will see that torpedo, because there was a specific Argentinian version that was modified in order to be able to carry the torpedo. So if it doesn't appear, it's because you've not selected the right model. Now what have we got there? Avionics master switch is off, and then it's back on again. And what have we got here? Fill the tanks. Engine prop pinch safety. You've got, come on, canopy closed. So canopy opens, canopy closes. So if you were thinking that this thing hasn't actually got a virtual cockpit, it kind of has. It's just not got a massively complex one. It's even got an autopilot that you can get a panel up for the autopilot, and it appears here. And then it's not the most complicated autopilot you've ever seen in your life, but it does have an autopilot on it. So we've got good set of gauges on there and what have you, but that's kind of about it. Landing gear lever there, and obviously you could use the G key to do that. And then you've got guarded switches here for the engines, engine controls there, avionics safety guard, and battery safety guard. So battery switch is on. So let's see if we could start this thing, shall we? So here we are looking at the Control-Ezy Pucara in P3D version 5. And there's the engines cranking up. These are intended to be jump in and go aeroplanes, so I have hit Control-E, which is what the product line is named after, to start both the engines, and you can see that they are starting up. And what you can tell is that there is a really good engine sound. Now, I'm just going to knock the sound off for a second or two because I don't want to be talking over the engines, but you can see that, or rather hear, that the engine sound is pretty good. Now, what we're looking at here is an Argentinian Air Force Pucara painted up as they appeared in the 1982 Falklands conflict. You can actually see one of these in an RAF museum in the UK because they captured one and brought it back. And this is perhaps sort of like the most well-known look for a Pucara. It's kind of the battle that I suppose the aeroplane's famous for, even though it didn't do particularly well in it. But not through the fault of the aircraft. It's just it was fighting in a conflict that it wasn't really designed for. The Pucara has also been involved in another war in Sri Lanka where it did quite well. What you have to bear in mind with the Pucara is that it is intended to be a sort of go and shoot rebels up in the hills type aeroplane. So it was hardly surprising that when it was going up against Royal Navy and Royal Air Force Harriers and Special Forces were sort of sabotaging them at Port Stanley and what have you, it was hardly surprising that it wasn't going to do that well in the Falklands War, and it did actually manage to do some successful missions anyway. And I think I'm right in saying that that one of them shot down a Westland Scout helicopter, if I remember rightly. So it wasn't without its victories. So anyway, here we are. It's in P3D. So what we've got is PBR textures, and you can see that this thing is a very nice model. It's quite well detailed. It's got good textures on it. You get 10 paint jobs with the thing. So you get sort of like Chilean versions and Sri Lankan versions and Argentinian versions, and you get more than one variant of the Pucara as well. Because I don't know whether you know this, but the Argentinians modified it during the Falklands War so that it could carry a torpedo so that they could attack Royal Navy ships. I don't think they ever actually got round to it, but there is a version that can carry a torpedo on the centerline. So if you try the weapon loadouts on it and it won't load the torpedo, it's probably because you've not got the version that was capable of carrying torpedoes. Now, the bombs are just for show. You can't launch them at stuff and what have you. Now, that is perhaps where the FSX version has a slight advantage over the P3D version, because if you've got FSX, you could go and get Captain Sim's weapon for FSX, which is a very good, fun product, and that will let you put machine guns and bombs and rockets on your aeroplanes in FSX, and they will actually work. So you could, in combination with that add-on, which I think is 10 quid if I remember rightly. I think it was 10 quid when I bought it. It was a long time ago. That, in combination with this, you would have a Pucara that was capable of doing ground attack missions. I can't say I've ever tried Weapon for FSX in P3D. I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe I'll try it sometime. But it'll definitely work in FSX, so there's an advantage to the FSX one. So yeah, you don't get PBR textures in the FSX version, but you might actually be able to have sort of working bombs and missiles in the FSX version. So swings and roundabouts, really. The textures on the FSX version, they are the same textures, they're just not PBR, so they've had to back them off a little bit, but yeah, PBR textures, they're all right, but you can live without them. So it's really the model that's model's the thing, as I say. So, and it is a very, very nice model. Now, the Control-Ezy concept is intended to be jump in and go aeroplanes, so not much on the control front. So here is the entire manual that you get for this. I'm going to show it you all of it. There you go, 7 pages. Not complicated. So this thing is intended to be a jump in and go aeroplane. Now, there have been some people a little bit alarmed with the notion of Aeroplane Heaven or Control-Ezy, if you want to refer to them as that, saying that there's no virtual cockpit, and it's not strictly true. What they've done conceptually is they've done the front part of the virtual cockpit, so it's kind of like a 3D version of the old 2D panels that you used to get on a lot of FS-98 planes and stuff like that. So if we have a look at this shot here, that is what you've got as a virtual cockpit. So you can move the view around a bit and zoom in and zoom out and what have you, and it is actually 3D. It's just that if you move your view to the side a lot with I don't know, chase plane or something like that, then you're going to get to a point where there's not going to be anything there. And on the subject of that, I'm moving the view here with the hat switch on my joystick. But when I get in the cockpit, even though my rotate view is on my joystick, when I get in the cockpit, it won't do it. And I'll show you that. So let's get in the cockpit. So I'm hitting S to go to the tower view, and then S to that view. And now we're in the cockpit. And I don't know whether you'll be able to hear this. I'll see if I can put the microphone near the hat switch on my joystick. Can you hear that clicking? That view is not moving at all. But it is a 3D cockpit, so if I scroll out on that thing there and move back, there is a sort of range of movement on it. If I move the view any further back than that, I'll see if I can do that, just to sort of show you what goes on. There we go. That is how much of the virtual cockpit is modelled. So that's what they're talking about when they're saying, yes, there's no virtual cockpit. There is a virtual cockpit. It's just not the entire thing, not the ejector seat, not the bits behind it and all that kind of stuff. It's enough of a virtual cockpit to have the panel on it. Yeah, so it's a 3D version of the old 2D panels that you got in FS-98, and the switches work on it. Yeah, not everything, but these things are intended to be simple. So you'll see that guarded switches, all of that stuff works. So there you go, battery switches on. You would hope so if the engines were running. So, you know, don't be put off by the notion that there aren't any sort of like switches to play around with in the cockpit. There are in fact quite a few. And so what we'll do is we'll go through them. So there you go, radio set safety, like that, and then we go there, toggle the radio set, boom, like that. So there's the radio set, and if I sort of roll back a little bit, this is actually your autopilot. So you've got that nav hold, you've got heading hold, or altitude hold I should say, and that one will be heading hold. So it's pretty simple, but it will let you fly like that. So there is an autopilot. Boom, so we get rid of that, put that guard back down. So then generator switch. Now because I hit Control-E, the generator switch went on, but you could come in the cockpit and hit the generator switch and turn the battery on and all that kind of stuff and start it like that if you wanted to. So it's a bit misleading to say that it hasn't got loads of hasn't got switches to play with, because clearly it has. So carrying on with the controls, we've got generator switches are on, we've got avionics master switches on, we've got the loadout selector there. Now currently there are no weapons on this thing there. You can switch this with the right and left clicks. So if I right click that, it does make a clicking noise. I've just got the sound off, so it makes a big clanging noise, and the tooltip tells you what you've got on. So I've got loud rockets on at the moment, so if you look on the external view, I'll turn the sound off again. You can see that now we've got some loud rockets on the pylons there. And if we go back into the cockpit, I'll switch it again, and what we've got is Mark 82 bombs, Snake Eyes, on all stores, so that'll be on both wings and some on the centre line as well. And then you've got a fuel tank on the centre line, and then you've got a fuel tank and Mark 82s on the wings. So we'll have a look at that so you can see what the Mark 82s look like. So there you go, centre line tank and some Mark 82s. Back in the cockpit so that we can change that again. click it again. Napalm. This really loads it up. We've got a lot of napalm bombs on there. There's 6 on the centre line and 3 on each wingtip, for a total of 12. You could really do some damage with that. And last but not least, boom, a torpedo. Now, if you don't see a torpedo on the centre line, that is because there is a specific torpedo version of the Pucara that the Argentinians developed so that they could attach Royal Navy ships during the Falklands conflict in '82. I don't think they got the chance to use it, but so if you try that and then you look externally and you go, oh, it's not got a torpedo on it, there is a specific torpedo version that does that. So I'll put that back on none, like that, and then we'll carry on with our little tour of the switches. So what we've got here is navigation light switch off. I'm going to put that on. That is the known glitch in P3D. If you use the keyboard shortcuts, i.e. Control-L or whatever, to turn the lights on an external view, then these switches will not turn the lights on. They know that's a known issue in the P3D version, not in the FSX version. The FSX version, not a problem. So that's something to be aware of. And then if I get a tooltip here, instrument panel light switch off and then on, and then you've got this thing here, weapon store selector for the wings, and you've got dump your stores safety cover so you can jettison your stores. Then coming down here, we've got fill the tanks, and we've got prop pitch safety, and then we've got close the canopy. So you can open the canopy and you can close the canopy. There is noise for that. It's just that I've got the sound off at the moment. And then we've got landing gear lever, which you can see is down, which is just as well since we're on the ground. And that's about the size of it, apart from, as I say, the hidden radio switch, which brings up the autopilot, so you can put heading hold, nav hold, and altitude hold on, and you can close that off if you want to, like that. Now, as far as the view is concerned, keeping in mind what I said before, oh, we've got this thing as well, yeah. The gauge lighting. Notice the tooltip there, prepared 3D only. When you've got that on, so if put the cockpit lighting on at night and what have you, that's a P3D thing only, so not in the FSX version. Now, the other view that you've got on the cockpit is, if I can get it, is that one, which is the flying view. So if we go up to the menu up top, you can see there, cockpit, you've got the starting front cockpit and the flying front cockpit. So the starting one is where you can see all the switches, and the flying one is where you've got this. Now, it is a collimated hood, so if I move the views about, what we would get is more of that sort of gun sight showing up. So if I flip this back, you can see that you can't really pick it up very well on that, but you can see when I'm changing the view, you can see that the hood is sort of disappearing there. I don't know whether you can make that out. So it is actually sort of changing views, and it does that on the other view as well, when we go like that. So if we move that, you can see with a bit of playing around, I can get that thing centered. Come on, beep. Get that in the middle. It's such a long time since I've used these keyboard shortcuts. Yeah, so you can move that. There we go. So that's your flying view. You can play around with it a bit. So it's not true to say that, which is a thing that people have been worried about, that it hasn't got a virtual cockpit. It kind of has got a virtual cockpit. It just hasn't got a full virtual cockpit. It's got another virtual cockpit for you to be able to play around with things. Obviously, not all of the switches work and stuff like that, and the bombs are purely a visual thing. However, as I say, in FSX, if you have Captain Sim's, what weapon for FSX, then what you could do is you could arm the thing and you would actually be able to shoot stuff. I've never actually tried Captain Sim's weapon for FSX in P3D. I've got it for FSX, obviously, and it's great fun. So I don't know whether it would work in FSX. I might try that at some point, but it definitely will work in FSX. So it might be the case that you could actually have a bit more fun with this in FSX than you could in P3D. It would depend on whether that Captain Sim weapon add-on works. If you use FSX, I would recommend getting that actually, because it's great fun. You can put guns on pretty much anything. If you want a 747 with a Gatling gun on it, you can do it. So it's great fun. Anyway, we are started up. The engines are running, and one thing I will say about this is that the engines are they provide a lot of thrust. So if I release the brakes, you'll see that this thing starts rolling straight away. So I've got the throttle right down, as low as I can go, and I release that, and this thing starts rolling already, even though the throttle is right down. So that's something to be aware of. But it does mean that when you go on the external view, if I've got the external view, is that you get that kind of bouncy nose gear there. So back with a point of view hat that actually works. I'll stick the engine noise on so you can hear what the engine sounds like now. So it's a speedy little bugger, this thing. Yeah, so you really got to be on the brakes, because you know, even at idle thrust, it will shift, and that is, I suppose, one of the fun things about the Pucara is that, and maybe one of the reasons why Aeroplane Heaven decided to do it is it's a little unusual aircraft. It's got a bit of history, but it's very fast at low level. So you know, if you like the idea of a sort of fast twin, it's not bad. Now, to take off, we would probably want some flaps. Oh, going off the runway there, or the taxiway I should say. So we'll get some flaps down. Come on, give me some flaps. There we go. So we get some flaps down. Now, one of the things about the Pucara is first flight 1969, and slightly unusual layout, with the sort of cranked wings and what have you, and the high T-tail. Most of this is geared, most of that design wise is geared towards it being able to operate off rough fields, because obviously with a high T-tail it's well clear of any mud that gets thrown up by the propellers and stuff like that. So that's the reasoning behind that. And if it banks slightly on takeoff, then the slightly angled wings that are like a Yodel or Jodel, if you pronounce it like that, would mean you've got less chance of striking a wingtip. So I think that's what the layout is about, because it's a counterinsurgency aircraft, so there's a good chance that it would want to operate off rough fields, and it can operate off short fields as well, which is, oh, got a plane coming towards me. I hope he's going to take off. Yeah, there you go. That's what you get for not using the ATC to get clearance. So it can take off from short runways, and it's just as well, because it would appear that we're heading into the wind here. Which is one of the reasons why it was one of the ones stationed at Port Stanley when the Argentinians occupied the Falkland Islands, or as they would call it, the Malvinas. In 1982. So back in the cockpit, let's take off. So we'll have some engine sound for this. So this thing tracks pretty straight. I got a full load of fuel on, but it's got quite a slow lift-off speed. So back on the external view. Bit of lag on loading the textures here. We've got ourselves a black stealth plane for a few seconds, and then we'll get the gear up. And then we'll take the flaps up. And you can see this thing really shifts. We're already doing 200 knots. And that's with a full fuel load on board. And this thing, it will overspeed if you get the throttle on. I'll see if I can get it to do it. So we're doing 250 knots. So by now we'd be being shouted at by ATC because we're well below 10,000 feet. Hitting a bit of turbulence there. 200, coming up on 270. We'll keep it down in the weeds since it's a ground attack plane. I'll knock the sound off so I'm not shouting over it. 275 knots. And because we're pretty low, if I keep that throttle on, eventually we're going to hit a point where it's going to start giving us an overspeed warning. I think this thing will do about 400 knots downhill with the wind behind it. I'm not sure of the maximum speed of it, but it's pretty nippy. So if you like belting along in a turboprop down valleys and stuff like that, it is a combat aeroplane and it is pretty quick. And that really is about the size of it. It flies, now I'm assuming this is kind of what the thing would fly like. Obviously I have never flown a Pucara, but it handles like you'd expect something like this to handle. So that's kind of cool. It's a little bit nippier than a typical twin turboprop because it's a military aeroplane, and obviously it's got a lot of power because it needs to lift heavy weapons, bombs slung under the wings and stuff like that. So it is a bit nippy, and when you get the speed on, of course, there's a lot of airflow over the ailerons. So with a bit of speed on, it's got a reasonably okay roll rate. You can see there. It's no jet fighter, but it's okay. And now we've got an overspeed warning, so that was at about 285 knots, something like that. Obviously you could get a bit faster if you went a bit higher up, so there we go. 285 knots it looks like it overspeeds at low altitude, so you'd probably have to get up high to get it up to, I don't know, 400 or whatever the speed is that it does. If I flick that back on the external view, there we go, it was loading the textures in a bit quicker. There's the there we go. So there's the runway that we came off, so we'll pop it back in for a landing. Bit of lag there. I don't think that is the plane. I think that's my P3D because as we speak, P3D is in the version 5 is in dire need of a patch since the Windows 10 update came out. And if you want to know how much it needs a patch, when P3D V5 first came out, it wasn't crashing at all, and now it crashes on a fairly regular basis, which makes doing reviews like this a bit of a pain in the arse, because you're halfway through recording something and then you have to start recording it again, which is a bit irritating. So hope that I remember to press the record button, because otherwise this is going to be really annoying and I'll have to do it yet again. Now coming around there, you can see landing lights and nav lights and all that kind of stuff, so it's a nice model. Now I think it's about a 430 megabyte download. It came down pretty quick. I got it off Sim Market, and it's around about the 20 quid mark. It's sort of $19.95, so there's very little difference between euros and pounds sterling and all that kind of stuff these days, so they're all around the 20 quid mark. Now, if I'm honest, I think that's a little bit over the odds for what it is, because there are a lot of freeware aeroplanes out there that are probably just as well featured as this thing is. And I think really that what this Control-Ezy stuff is about is Aeroplane Heaven getting set up for the PlayStation crowd for the new Microsoft Flight Simulator. I really do think that's what it's about. Let's get some flaps down and get some gear down as well, and we'll let's get on the external view. Well, it looks like my gear and flaps are down. I think so. I think that's really what it's about, and I think for what you're getting, don't get me wrong, it's kind of fun, but is it 20 quid's worth of fun? I would suggest not. If you asked me to put a price on it, I'd say a little bit less than 15 quid would probably be. God, that thing's floating a lot. Guess we're going round. Gear up, flaps up. I'd say, you know, just maybe a little bit less than 15 quid would be a fairer price for a thing. I mean, you mean 1995 is one of those sort of marketing nice round numbers and what have you. But the way sales are in being fairly frequent for things, for 1995, you can get a lot of fun stuff. I mean, you can get the MiG-29 in DCS for 15 quid. You can get the F-15 in DCS for 15 quid. You can get the Sukhoi 27 for that same price. You can get a Harrier or a Tornado on the Just Flight website for, I think, 12 quid. Currently, at the time of me doing this video, the fly free standard MiGs and Sukhois are all on sale for about $12.99. These are some good add-ons that are less than this thing. And the other thing that is a bit of a fly in the ointment where this thing is concerned is that this is a twin-engine turboprop counterinsurgency aeroplane with, you know, kind of fun features, not super detailed, for 20 quid. But for 30 quid, another 10 quid, you can get the Aerosoft Bronco X, which works in P3D as well, even though they say it's an FSX aeroplane, it does work in P3D, and that is a very, very similar aeroplane to this. It's a twin-engine turboprop counterinsurgency plane, got roughly the same performance, but that has a full avionics suite with realistic engine modelling where you can get lockups on the engines if you don't manage them properly and all that kind of stuff. And when you consider that that's 10 quid more than this, that's why I'm saying that I think this is a little bit over the odds money-wise. Whether or not people will agree with me and whether it will sell, I don't know. I like it, you know, it's good fun, but the real reason that I bought this was kind of, I was taking one for the team, as it were, in that this is a new concept from Aeroplane Heaven, this Control-Ezy stuff, and I thought someone ought to do a review of it and be honest about it and have a good look at it. And if I hadn't had that intention to do that, I probably wouldn't have been quite so ready to throw 20 quid at it. But you can make your own mind up about that.
Now at this point, P3D version 5 crashed again, so I never got to land the thing, and I decided not to bother reloading it just to do the landing because I'd already done a touch and go. So here's a last look at the manual. Obviously, you can pause the video if you want to and see all of the features that are in the thing and whether you think the manual explains stuff as it should do. 1995, 439 meg download, obviously expanding a bit more when you install the thing. 7-page PDF manual that explains things pretty well. It offers good performance. Don't be put off by the fact that it was lagging and crashing. That was P3D version 5 that was behind that, because it's doing it with everything at the minute. So it's definitely not this aeroplane. Decide for yourself whether you think that's worth 20 quid. As I say, I quite like it, but I think 15 quid would be a fairer price, and I think an ideal price for it, if you ask me, and not just because I like a bargain. I'd say 12 quid would be a fair price. I really do, because it's competing with some freeware stuff that is as well featured. Anyway, that's it for this review. I hope you liked it, and take care and look out for another one soon. Bye.